my dad disowned me for playing video games. My esports team just won $8 million in one tournament. My dad unplugged my gaming PC mid-tournament and threw it out our second-story window. I watched my custom-built rig worth $3,000 shatter on the driveway while my teammates screamed through my headset asking where I went. We were up 2-0 in the finals. One more map win, and we'd qualify for regionals. Instead, I listened to glass and metal explode on concrete while my dad said I had 1 hour to pack my shit and get out. I was 19 years old with $847 in my bank account, and my entire life was competitive gaming. That was the day I stopped being his son. I'm Jordan Kavinsky, and this is the story of how my father's contempt accidentally created the esports player who'd humiliate him on a stage watched by 40 million people worldwide. The PC incident happened on a Saturday in February. I'd been grinding for 6 months with my team Apex Legends, scrimmaging 8 hours daily and streaming another 4 to build audience. We'd climbed from unknown to top 20 in North American rankings. Major organizations were starting to notice us. Sponsors were reaching out. My Twitch channel had 45,000 followers and I was making $2,000 monthly from subscriptions and donations. Not life-changing money, but enough to prove this wasn't just a hobby. My dad didn't care about any of that. He worked construction, came home exhausted, and saw his son playing children's games instead of getting a real job. Never mind that I'd shown him my Twitch earnings or explained prize pool distributions. Never mind that professional gamers were making millions. To him, anything involving a screen and a controller was worthless. That Saturday, he'd come home early from a job site and heard me calling strategies through my headset, heard the intensity in my voice, walked into my room without knocking and saw me locked into the game, asked me to take out the trash. I said, "Give me 20 minutes, we're in finals." He asked again. I said, "I literally cannot leave right now, 20 minutes. That's when he unplugged everything and carried my tower to the window. I ran downstairs to the driveway. My PC was destroyed, GPU cracked, motherboard shattered, everything ruined. My teammates were still in the tournament 1 player down. I watched on my phone as they lost the next 2 maps and got eliminated. 6 months of work gone because my dad couldn't wait 20 minutes for trash removal. I went back inside, shaking. My dad was in the kitchen drinking a beer like nothing happened. I said, "Do you have any idea what you just did?" He said, "I taught you a lesson about priorities and respect. That was a $3,000 computer." He said, "Maybe you shouldn't have spent $3,000 on toys." I told him I made that money streaming. He laughed and said watching teenagers play video games wasn't a real job. I asked what qualified as real in his worldview. He said something that required leaving your bedroom, something that built actual skills, something he could explain to his friends without being embarrassed. That's when he told me I had an hour to pack. He was done enabling my delusion. I could come back when I was ready to be an adult. I called my teammate Liam, who said I could crash on his couch. Liam lived in a studio apartment near campus that he shared with his girlfriend Ava. They had a futon and minimal space, but they said I could stay until I figured things out. I packed 2 bags of clothes, grabbed my backup laptop, and left. My mom stood in the doorway crying, but didn't intervene. My younger sister Natalie was 16 and looked horrified. I hugged her and said I'd be fine. My dad sat in his chair drinking beer and watching TV like I wasn't leaving. I walked out and didn't say goodbye. Liam picked me up 20 minutes later. We drove in silence. He didn't ask what happened because he'd heard the whole thing through Discord. The team group chat was already blowing up with outrage. Our coach Damien wanted to know if I was okay and whether I could still play. I said I was fine, and yes. We had regionals coming up in 6 weeks, and I'd find a way to be ready. That night on Liam's futon, I did math. I had $847 in checking. Needed a new PC immediately. Could build a decent rig for $2,500 if I bought used components and skipped aesthetics. That left me negative $653 before accounting for food, phone bill, or any other expenses. I made $2,000 monthly from Twitch, but that was before taxes and platform cuts. Real take-home was closer to $1,400. Still not enough to be independent. Liam worked at a coffee shop and got me a job there the next Monday. Morning shift, 5 a.m. to noon, $12 an hour, plus tips. I'd work then practice with the team from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m., then stream until midnight. 3 hours of sleep, then back to work. The schedule was brutal, but necessary. I needed money for a new PC and proof I could support myself. My dad had called my independence a delusion. I'd prove it was the only realistic thing I'd ever pursued. I bought used components over 2 weeks. Budget GPU, decent CPU, bare minimum everything else. Built it at Liam's apartment on his tiny desk. It wasn't pretty, but it ran. I tested it streaming and hit my usual 45,000 viewers. Nobody cared that my setup was scuffed. They cared that I showed up and performed. First stream back, I addressed what happened without naming my dad. Said I'd had a setback, but was rebuilding. Donations flooded in. People sent $5, $20, $100 with messages about believing in me. I made $800 that first night back, more than my coffee shop job paid in a week. The support was overwhelming and also proved my dad completely wrong about this community. Regionals were in Atlanta in 5 weeks. Our team needed to place top 8 to qualify for nationals. We were ranked 14th going in. Not impossible, but difficult. We'd been practicing with 5 players, and now we were adjusting to being one man down in a crucial tournament. Except we weren't adjusting. We were improving. Losing that finals match had lit something in all of us. The anger became fuel. We scrimmed harder, analyzed our mistakes obsessively, and developed strategies specifically designed to counter top teams. Damien, our coach, was former semi-pro who'd retired at 24 due to wrist injuries. He saw potential in us that nobody else had noticed. Said we played with chemistry most teams took years to develop. That our communication was elite level. That we just needed consistency and we'd be unstoppable. He'd been saying that for months, but after the PC incident, something shifted. We started winning scrims against teams ranked above us. Started getting noticed by analysts and commentators. By the time we flew to Atlanta, we were ranked 11th and rising. The tournament was at a convention center with 2,000 spectators and streaming to 500,000 viewers online. Massive production, professional casters, teams backed by organizations worth millions. We were still unsigned, still grinding independently, still sleeping on couches and working coffee shops. But we had momentum. We won our first match 3-1 against the 6th seed. Commentators were shocked. Our second match went to a deciding game, but we closed it out. By semifinals, we'd beaten 3 top 10 teams, and suddenly everyone was asking who we were. Social media was blowing up. Clips of my plays were trending. Analysts were calling me a breakout star. We lost in finals to the first seed, but secured second place, which qualified us for nationals. More importantly, we got noticed. 3 major esports organizations reached out within hours wanting to sign us. The prize money for second was $15,000 split 5 ways. I walked away with $3,000 before taxes. More money than I'd ever had at once. I paid Liam and Ava $500 for letting me stay. Put the rest toward bills and savings. For the first time since leaving home, I felt stable, like this might actually work. My dad texted me 3 days after Atlanta, first contact in 6 weeks. Said he'd seen clips of the tournament online. Someone at his work had mentioned it. He wanted to know if that was really me. I didn't respond. Nationals were in Las Vegas in 3 months. Prize pool was $500,000, with first place taking $200,000. Life-changing money. We signed with an organization called Zenith Gaming, who gave us salaries, equipment, and a team house in Los Angeles. Suddenly, we were professional. No more coffee shop jobs or couches. We had a house with dedicated practice space, a manager, analysts, and support staff. The organization flew us to LA and set us up with everything we needed. My salary was $4,000 monthly, plus housing covered, plus prize pool earnings and stream revenue. I was making more money gaming than my dad made in construction. The irony wasn't lost on me. We trained in LA for 3 months. 8-hour practice days with professional coaching, VOD review, strategy sessions, scrims against international teams. The level of competition was insane. We were good, but so was everyone else at this level. Every team had players who'd sacrificed everything to be there. Every match was decided by tiny margins, and who wanted it more. Damien kept saying we had the intangibles, the chemistry and hunger that couldn't be taught. We just needed to execute under pressure. Las Vegas was overwhelming. The venue was a stadium holding 12,000 people. 3 days of matches broadcasted to millions worldwide. Every major team was there, including Korean and European champions. We were underdogs ranked 16th in a field of 32. Nobody expected us to make it past quarterfinals. We went 3-0 in groups playing flawlessly. Suddenly we were favorite storyline, independent team that grinded up from nothing. Commentators were hyping us as the Cinderella run. My stream blew up to 200,000 followers. Brands started reaching out wanting sponsorships. Everything was accelerating faster than I could process. My mom texted me the night before playoffs. Said she'd been following the tournament online. She was proud of me. My sister Natalie sent messages between matches. Said dad was watching but wouldn't admit it. Said he'd been quieter lately, less certain about his opinions. I didn't know what to do with that information. I was too focused on the tournament to think about family dynamics. Quarterfinals we played the 3rd seed from Korea. Best team we'd faced all tournament. They were methodical and precise. We traded maps back and forth until we were tied 2-2 going into the decider. The final map lasted 67 minutes. Longest pro match that year. Every round was intense. We lost multiple times, then clawed back. Down match point 3 different times. Each time we found a way to survive. The crowd was losing their minds. Commentators were screaming. When we finally won, the stadium erupted. I collapsed in my chair, shaking. Liam was crying. We'd just beaten one of the best teams in the world in the most dramatic fashion possible. Semi-finals, we faced the European champions. Another brutal series that went to 5 maps. We won 3-2, and suddenly we were in finals. Guaranteed at least $80,000 split 5 ways. $16,000 for me, before taxes. More money than I'd made in my entire life. But we weren't thinking about money. We were thinking about the team we'd face in finals. The same first seed that beat us in Atlanta. The team everyone expected to win the whole tournament. Finals day, the stadium was packed. 12,000 people chanting and waving signs. Online viewership hit 3 million concurrent viewers. Prize pool for first place was $200,000. For second was $80,000. The difference was enormous, but more than that, this was for legacy. for proving we belonged at the top. The match started rough. We lost the first map badly. They were executing perfectly and we were making mistakes. Second map we adjusted and won convincingly. Third map was back and forth, but they closed it out. We were down 2-1 and one map away from losing. Damien called timeout and gave us the speech. Said we'd earned everything we'd gotten to this point, that nobody expected us to be here, that we had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Said play with the hunger that got us here. Don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid to have regrets. Fourth map we dominated. Won 13-3 in one of the most one-sided maps of the tournament. Suddenly we were tied 2-2 going into the decider. The crowd was deafening. Commentators were calling it the best finals in years. Everything came down to one final map. The deciding map was on our best location. We'd practiced it hundreds of times, had strategies specifically for this exact scenario. We came out aggressive and won the first 3 rounds, but they adjusted and won the next 4. Suddenly we were down 3-4 and losing momentum. Liam made a clutch play to tie it 4-4. Then I had the play that would define my career. Enemy team was executing a strategy we'd seen before. I called the counter and positioned perfectly. When they pushed, I eliminated 3 players in 5 seconds. The crowd erupted. Commentators were screaming. The clip would hit 10 million views within 24 hours. We won that round and the next 3 to close out the map 8-5. We'd won nationals, $200,000 prize pool, $40,000 each before taxes, champions. The moment was surreal. We were screaming and hugging while confetti fell and the crowd chanted our names. Cameras everywhere, analysts rushing to interview us. The trophy presentation happened on stage with all 12,000 people watching. When they handed me the trophy, I looked directly into the camera knowing my dad was watching somewhere. Held it up and didn't say anything. Just let the image speak for itself. His son, who he'd disowned for gaming, was now a national champion holding a trophy and a check for $40,000. The interview afterward was broadcasted live to millions. The host asked about my journey to this moment. I kept it professional, but told the truth. Said I'd been kicked out of my house 6 months ago for prioritizing gaming over what my father considered real work. That I'd slept on a couch and worked a coffee shop job at 5 a.m. while practicing 8 hours daily. That people told me gaming wasn't a real career, but here I was, making more money than most college graduates. Said this was for everyone who'd been told their dreams were worthless. The clip went mega viral. 40 million views across platforms. News outlets picked it up. Esports journalists wrote articles about my story. Suddenly I was the face of the gaming is a real career movement. Brands wanted me for sponsorships. My stream exploded to 500,000 followers. But the money and fame felt secondary to the validation. I'd proven my dad catastrophically wrong on the biggest possible stage. My phone blew up after the interview. Friends, teammates, random people congratulating me. My mom called crying, saying she'd watched everything. My sister Natalie sent a long text about how proud she was, said Dad had watched the finals at home alone, turned off the TV after my interview without saying anything, went out to his truck and sat there for an hour. She said he looked smaller somehow, like something had broken. My dad finally called me 3 days after nationals. First actual conversation in 7 months. His voice was different, quieter. He said he'd watched the tournament, saw the interview, wanted to talk. I almost hung up, but something made me listen. He said he'd been wrong about gaming, that he hadn't understood what I was building, that seeing me on that stage holding the trophy made him realize how badly he'd misjudged everything. He said he was proud of me. The words felt empty, like he was proud of the success but not the journey, proud of the result, but not the kid who'd grinded in his bedroom for years before anyone noticed. I asked him what specifically he was proud of. Long silence. Then he said he didn't know how to answer that. Said he'd spent so many years dismissing what I did that he never actually learned what it was. He'd been proud of his assumptions about success, not about me. At least he was honest. I told him I appreciated the call, but I wasn't ready for reconciliation. That you don't get to kick someone out, then come back when they prove you wrong. He said he understood. Asked if maybe we could talk again sometime. I said maybe, but I didn't promise anything. The conversation ended awkwardly. No dramatic forgiveness or emotional reunion. Just 2 people acknowledging a gap that might never fully close. The esports organization Zenith Gaming renegotiated our contracts after nationals. Gave us significant raises and better revenue sharing on merchandise and sponsorships. My new salary was $8,000 monthly plus bonuses. Plus stream revenue, which had exploded to $15,000 monthly. Plus sponsorship deals worth another $10,000 monthly. I was making over $30,000 a month before prize pools. At 20 years old. Playing video games. I bought a condo in Los Angeles near the team house. Nothing massive, but it was mine. No landlord, no couch surfing, no asking permission. The independence felt more valuable than the luxury. I furnished it simply and set up a proper streaming space. The place felt like proof that I'd been right all along, that this career was sustainable and real. I wished I could show my 19-year-old self, sleeping on Liam's futon, what was possible 6 months later. The suffering had been worth it. Internationals were announced for later that year. Seoul, South Korea. $8 million prize pool. Largest in esports history. First place would take $2.4 million split among 5 players, $480,000 each before taxes. The number was absurd, life-altering wealth for a single tournament. Every top team globally would compete, 64 teams from every region. We were ranked 4th in the world going in as defending national champions. Expectations were massive. We trained for 4 months. Brutal schedule. Our coach Damien pushed us harder than ever. Said this was our chance to cement legacy, to go from national champions to world champions. The pressure was immense. Other teams were studying our strategies. We couldn't rely on surprise anymore. We had to be fundamentally better than everyone else. The grind was exhausting mentally and physically. Wrist pain, eye strain, sleep deprivation. But we were focused. Seoul was in September. The venue was a 20,000-seat stadium. Production value was insane. Opening ceremony had K-pop performances and pyrotechnics. Prize pool reveal was dramatic with the $8 million displayed on massive screens. Every player there understood what was at stake. This wasn't just a tournament, it was a referendum on our entire careers. We dominated group stage going 4-0, looked like the best team in the tournament. Analysts were favoring us to win. But playoffs were different. Every team elevated their play. Every match was brutally competitive. We beat the 5th seed in quarterfinals 3-1, but it was closer than the score suggested. Semifinals we faced a Chinese team ranked 2nd globally. They'd been dominant all year. The match went to 5 maps. We were down 2-1 at one point, came back to tie at 2-2. The final map was tense. Lead changed 6 times. We won 10-8 in overtime. The arena was deafening. We were in finals again. Our opponent in finals was a European super team that had won 3 straight international tournaments. They were the favorites. They had the best individual players in the world and flawless teamwork. Everyone expected them to win, but we'd prepared specifically for them, studied every match they'd played, identified their patterns and tendencies. Damien had strategies designed to counter their strengths. The finals was best of 7, first team to 4 map wins. We came out aggressive and won the first map convincingly. They adjusted and won the next 2. Suddenly we were down 2-1 and looked shaky, but we'd been here before. We won map 4 to tie at 2-2, lost map 5 in a close match to go down 3-2. 1 map away from losing. Everything on the line. Map 6 we played perfectly. Every call was correct. Every shot landed. Every strategy executed flawlessly. We won 13-4 in the most dominant map of the entire tournament. Tied 3-3 going into the decider. The stadium was going absolutely insane. 20,000 people screaming, 15 million watching online, $2.4 million on the line. This was the moment everything had been building toward. The final map was chaos. Both teams playing at the highest level. Incredible plays happening every round. Lead changed constantly. We were up 5-3. They came back to tie 5-5. We went up 7-5. They tied it 7-7. The tension was unbearable. Every round felt like it lasted forever. We got to map point first at 12-11. 1 round away from winning, they came back and tied at 12-12, then went up 13-12. Suddenly they were on championship point. 1 round away from winning and we'd lose everything. Timeout. Damien looked at us and said, "This is what we trained for." This exact moment. Down championship point in the biggest tournament in history. Said, forget the money and the pressure. Play for each other. Play like we did when we were nobodies grinding in basements. Win this round, and we're still alive. The final round lasted 8 minutes. Longest single round in competitive history. Both teams playing perfectly. Multiple clutch plays on both sides. It came down to a 1v1, me versus their best player. I had no information on his location. He could be anywhere. The crowd was silent. Millions watching. Everything came down to this moment. I made a read based on tendencies I'd studied. Pushed aggressively to a position most players wouldn't check. He was there. I eliminated him before he could react. Round over. Map tied 13-13. Overtime. Overtime rules were simple. First team to win 2 rounds in a row wins the map in the tournament. We won the first overtime round, then lost the second. Back to square one. Won the 3rd round, lost the 4th. This went on for 6 overtime rounds, both teams refusing to break. Finally, on the 7th overtime exchange, we won 2 rounds consecutively. 16-14 final score. We'd won. World champions. $2.4 million prize pool. $480,000 each. The moment was indescribable. We collapsed out of our chairs. Liam was sobbing. I was screaming. The arena erupted. Confetti cannons. Fireworks. The trophy presentation was on stage in front of 20,000 people. When they handed me the trophy, I held it above my head and thought about my dad throwing my PC out the window 10 months ago. Thought about him saying I was wasting my life. Thought about sleeping on Liam's couch wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. None of that mattered now. I was a world champion. The post-match interview was broadcasted globally. The host asked how it felt to go from being kicked out for gaming to winning the biggest esports tournament in history. I said it felt like vindication. Said this was for everyone who'd been told to get a real job, for everyone whose parents didn't understand, for everyone who'd sacrificed everything to chase a dream other people called childish. Said the real waste would have been giving up because someone else couldn't see the vision. The clip got 60 million views, became the most watched esports interview ever. My story was everywhere. Mainstream news covered it. Talk shows wanted me as a guest. I became the poster child for modern career paths and following unconventional dreams despite family opposition. The attention was overwhelming, but also validating. My dad called me the day after finals. I almost didn't answer, but figured I owed him this conversation. He congratulated me, said he'd watched every match, said the money was unfathomable to him, that I'd made in one tournament what he'd make in 10 years of construction work. I asked if he finally understood this was a real career. Long pause. He said he understood it was lucrative, but he still didn't fully understand it. Couldn't wrap his head around people making this much money playing games. I told him that was his limitation, not mine. That his inability to understand didn't make it less real. That I'd proven everything I'd set out to prove, and I didn't need his validation anymore. He said he wasn't trying to diminish my achievement. He was proud even if he didn't fully get it. I asked him what he was proud of specifically. He said he was proud I'd succeeded despite him trying to stop me. That I'd been right and he'd been wrong, and watching me prove that had been humbling. The honesty surprised me. He said throwing my PC out the window was the biggest mistake he'd ever made as a parent, that he'd let his ego and outdated worldview damage our relationship possibly permanently, that he didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted me to know he understood what he'd done. I told him I appreciated the acknowledgement, but we had years of damage to unpack. That one phone call didn't fix disowning me and calling my life's work worthless. He said he knew. Asked if I'd be willing to see him sometime, maybe have dinner and actually talk. I said I'd think about it. The conversation ended better than the last one, but I still felt conflicted. Part of me wanted reconciliation. Part of me wanted him to sit with the consequences of his actions. I didn't know which impulse was right. My mom and sister flew to LA to visit me a month after internationals. First time seeing them since I'd left home. My mom cried when she saw my condo. Said she was so proud and so sorry she hadn't done more to stop my dad. I told her I didn't blame her, that she'd been stuck in an impossible situation. My sister Natalie was 17 now. She said watching my journey had changed how she thought about her own future, that she was going to pursue what she loved regardless of what Dad thought. Seeing me succeed had given her permission to take risks. We had dinner and they told me what life had been like at home. My dad had become quieter, less certain about everything. He'd watched all my matches and followed my career obsessively but never mentioned it at home, just processed it privately. My mom said he'd changed, that my success had forced him to reconsider fundamental beliefs about work and value, that he was struggling with the cognitive dissonance of his son making more money gaming than he'd made in 20 years of physical labor. I asked if he'd apologized to them for how he'd handled everything. My mom said yes, multiple times, said he'd admitted he'd been wrong and pushed away his son over ego. Natalie said he'd asked her about her interests for the first time in years, actually listened when she talked about her passion for graphic design. The man who'd been so rigid was trying to become more open. It was progress, but didn't erase what happened. I told them I wasn't ready for full reconciliation with Dad yet, that I needed time to process everything. They understood, said they'd keep the door open whenever I was ready. Before they left, my mom gave me a box, said she'd saved everything from when I was growing up. Photos, school projects, childhood drawings, said she wanted me to have them, that she was sorry she hadn't protected those things from my dad's judgment the way she should have protected me. I met with my dad 6 months after internationals. Neutral location, coffee shop in our hometown. He looked older than I remembered. Gray hair, tired eyes. We sat down and he started talking immediately. Said he'd been thinking about this conversation for months, that he'd practiced what he wanted to say. He apologized for throwing out my PC, for kicking me out, for years of dismissing my passion, for making me feel like I had to choose between family and my dreams. Said he'd been threatened by my success because it challenged everything he believed about how the world worked. That watching me achieve things through a path he couldn't understand had made him feel obsolete and defensive. I listened without interrupting. He said he'd been raised to believe hard physical work was the only legitimate way to earn money, that his father had taught him this, and his grandfather before that seeing his son make $500,000 playing video games had shattered that worldview completely. Said it wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation, that his cruelty had come from fear and insecurity. I asked him what he wanted from this conversation. He said he wanted a relationship with me if I was willing, that he understood if I wasn't, that he'd accept whatever boundaries I needed. Said he just wanted me to know he was sorry and that he was working on becoming less judgmental and more open-minded. I told him I appreciated the apology, but trust took time to rebuild, that I couldn't just forget being disowned, that his words had done real damage I was still processing. He said he understood, asked if we could start small, maybe talk on the phone occasionally, maybe visit once in a while, build back slowly. I said I could try that. We finished coffee and he hugged me before I left. First physical contact in over a year. Felt strange, but not terrible. I drove away feeling conflicted. Part of me wanted to forgive him completely. Part of me wanted him to suffer more. I didn't know which part was healthier. Over the next year, we talked monthly. Awkward phone conversations where he'd ask about tournaments and I'd give brief updates. Slowly, we found easier topics. I told him about traveling for competitions. He told me about construction projects. We weren't close, but we were communicating. My mom said he'd framed a photo of me holding the championship trophy, put it in his home office where he'd see it daily, that he'd told his friends at work his son was a professional gamer, that he was trying to understand my world even though it was foreign to him. The effort mattered even if the gap remained. 2 years after internationals, I was 22 and one of the highest-earning esports players globally. I'd won 3 more major tournaments, had sponsorships with major brands. My stream averaged 400,000 viewers. I'd made over $2 million in career earnings, bought a house, invested intelligently, set up college funds for younger cousins. The financial security was surreal. I still sometimes thought about sleeping on Liam's futon, wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake leaving home. The contrast was staggering. My relationship with my dad had stabilized into something functional, if not warm. We talked every few weeks, visited a few times a year. He'd stopped trying to understand gaming, and instead just accepted it as my career. Said he didn't need to get it to be proud of me, that watching me build something from nothing had taught him about determination and vision, that he wished he'd seen those qualities earlier instead of dismissing them. I started a foundation helping young gamers from difficult family situations, provided equipment, coaching, and housing assistance for kids whose parents didn't support their esports aspirations, named it Second Chance Gaming, funded it entirely from my tournament winnings. We helped 200 kids in the first year. Every one of them reminded me of myself at 19 with nowhere to go and everything to prove. The foundation became as important to me as competing, giving back to a community that had lifted me up. My dad came to watch me compete in person for the first time 3 years after the disowning. Flew to Dallas for a major tournament, sat in the crowd with my mom and Natalie. I saw them before the match started and felt nervous for the first time in years. Not about the competition, but about him watching. We won the tournament 3-1. Afterward, he came backstage, shook my hand, and said he'd never seen anything like that. That watching me compete had finally helped him understand this was legitimate sport. That the strategy and teamwork and pressure were real. That he got it now. The validation felt good, even though I'd stopped needing it. We had dinner that night. My whole family together for the first time since I'd left home. The conversation was still somewhat stiff, but warmer than before. My dad asked intelligent questions about training and strategy, actually listened to my answers. My mom cried multiple times, saying she was grateful we'd found our way back to each other. Natalie talked about her graphic design work, and my dad encouraged her, told her to pursue it seriously. The man who'd disowned me for following my passion was now telling his daughter to do the same. Growth was possible, even in rigid people. The meal ended with my dad pulling me aside. He said he wanted me to know something, that throwing my PC out the window had been the worst decision of his life, that he thought about it constantly, that he'd tried to break me and instead had freed me to become extraordinary. Said he was grateful I'd succeeded despite him, that watching my career had changed him fundamentally as a person, made him question assumptions he'd held for 50 years. I told him I'd forgiven him, even though the hurt remained, that we'd never have the relationship we might have had if he'd supported me from the start, but we could build something new from here. He said that was more than he deserved. We hugged and it felt less awkward than before. 5 years after being disowned, I'm 24 and considering retirement from competitive play. My wrists are damaged from years of intensive gaming. Doctors say I have maybe 2 more years before the pain becomes unbearable. I've made over $4 million in career earnings, have successful investments and business ventures. I'm transitioning into coaching and content creation, building the next generation of players. My relationship with my dad has continued improving slowly. We talk weekly now. He watches my streams sometimes, even though he doesn't fully understand the games, asks questions and actually listens. He's met my teammates and colleagues, saw my team house and training facility. The life I'd built became real to him through exposure and time. He tells people his son is a professional gamer now, not with shame, but with something approaching pride. The journey from disowning me to claiming me publicly took 5 years. Better late than never, but the years lost still hurt. Thanks for hanging out till the end. If you want more stories, make sure to subscribe and leave your take below.